I'm James Rosone.
And I'm Miranda Watson. We're the husband and wife writing team that created the military thriller Monroe Doctrine series and the military sci-fi series The Rise of the Republic.
We have some additional content we'd like to share with you guys today, and we hope you'll find it informative and entertaining. We're planning to create more videos similar to this in the future.
As always, please like, share, and subscribe. Now let's get started.
Chapter 9. Battle of the Bridges. 1st August 1990. 35th Armored Brigade Headquarters, west of Al Jarrah, Kuwait. Captain Khan had drawn the short stick to be the duty officer for the night shift. He had wanted to be on the day shift, where all the action was, but that wasn't to be. Then the phone rang. "Hello, 35th Armored Brigade, Captain Khan, duty officer." "Captain Khan, this is Colonel Al-Sarur. Put the brigade on alert and order an immediate recall." Colonel Salem Massoud Al-Sarur commanded the 35th Armored Brigade. He continued, "I want all commanders and staff in the headquarters in 1 hour. Tell the 7th and 8th battalions to upload their ammunition immediately, and the 51st Artillery as well. Have the 57th Mechanized Battalion get their people back and prepare their vehicles. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir, of course. What is happening?" "The 8th Battalion only has one company here, as the other companies are on guard in the northern oil fields. The 57th has one company deployed on Bubian Island and one on Failaka Island." "Do you want me to recall them as well?" Captain Khan asked, in excitement, as the adrenaline began to kick in. "The Iraqis are preparing to invade. Get everyone you can. We may not be able to recall the deployed units, but I still want them on alert. Now get the alert orders out immediately," Colonel Al-Sarur said, almost shouting. "Yes, sir." As the alert went out using alert rosters, soldiers began arriving back in the unit areas. The real problem they were going to face, however, was that annual leave had started. Many people were out of town, or could not be readily reached. They'd have to go with whatever soldiers they could muster in such a short time. It was nearly 0300 hours when Colonel Al-Sarur could finally meet with the bulk of his staff officers and commanders. He didn't waste a moment. "Gentlemen, I want to bring you up to speed on the situation as it stands right now. It appears the Iraqi forces have officially crossed our border at 0030 hours and now occupy Al-Ratka." Those present exchanged looks of disbelief and bewilderment. "They are attacking down Highway 80 as we speak. It looks like they are going to try to seize Mutla Ridge with a heliborne assault, just like they seized the Dasman Palace and the International Airport. Right now I need to know the status of your units," Al-Sarur said, as he looked at the 7th Battalion executive officer. "Sir, I have not been able to contact the battalion commander as of yet," Captain Nassar said. "As soldiers report, I have been checking them in. If they have any tank experience, I am assigning them to a crew and a tank and sending them to upload the ammo. None of our tanks were previously uploaded, so right now that is what we are doing. It is going to take some time, I am afraid." "How many tanks have you manned thus far?" 10 tanks, sir," Captain Nassar said, a bit dejected. "And the status of 8th Battalion?" the colonel asked, looking at a company commander from that battalion. "Sir, our battalion commander with 2 companies and some dismounted infantry is up north on guard duty. I am the only commander back here, and I have 10 tanks. We are uploading ammo and fuel as we speak. Our company just came back from up there. I have all my crews either present or en route at this time," Captain Al-Abdul Karim reported. "Very good, Captain. Status of the 57th Mech?" the colonel asked, looking at another company commander. "Sir, the anti-tank company is fully manned and uploaded," Captain Malouf indicated. "Good. I want you to move out at 4:30. Initially deploy in 2 sections. One section I want to go to the Ali Al-Salem Air Base to provide security, and the second I want to secure the intersection of the 6th Circular Road and the Salmi Road. Understood?" "Yes, sir," Captain Malouf said. "And the rifle company?" Colonel Al-Sarur asked, looking at the officer seated next to Captain Malouf. The colonel could not remember the captain's name, as he had only recently taken command. "Sir, my company has 5 BMP-2s ready, and several of our M113s are in the process of uploading their ammo. The BMPs have completed their uploads," the captain said. "Artillery status?" "Sir, we have put together enough people at this point to man 7 of our M109 self-propelled guns," the battalion executive officer said. He could not locate the battalion commander, so he'd taken charge for the moment. Just then, the door opened, and LTC Ahmad al-Wazan, commander of the 7th Tank Battalion, came in. "Forgive me, sir, for being late. I had difficulty getting through the city." "I understand, Colonel. Your executive officer has been on top of the situation." "All right. At 600 hours we depart with 7th Battalion as the lead element. We will move to block the forces coming down from Mutla Ridge. We will follow Salmi Road and take up positions along the 6th Circular Road. Colonel Al-Wazan, you are to take positions on the north side of Salmi Road. Captain Al-Abdul Karim, you take 3rd Company and take up positions on the south side of Salmi Road. This will place the bridges that overpass Highway 80, Salmi Road, and the 6th Circular Road between your 2 forces. Any questions? If not, then let's get ready to move out," Colonel Al-Soror said. Sitting inside his vehicle, Colonel Al-Soror knew that in 5 minutes, the 7th Tank Battalion would move out and head for its objective. He glanced over to the east. The sun was just starting to crest over the Arabian Gulf. The orange, yellow, and pink sky announced its coming. It would be another warm day, but July was always warm here. As he watched the sun rise, he wondered if it would set on a free Kuwait. If help did not come, he knew the answer to that question. To the west, he heard a thunderous explosion that quickly snatched his attention. A black mushroom cloud rose above Ali al-Salam military airfield, where one of his 2 sections had moved. "I hope they were away from that," he thought, as the 1st Chieftain tank rolled past his position. He counted each tank as they drove past him. A smile appeared on his face when the 37th drove past. Good. 3rd Company of the 8th Battalion had 10, and that means that 7th Battalion was able to get 27 tanks out. In a gunfight, they will be equal to the T-72. Now if the engines will just hold up. As the 7th rolled onto the Salmi Road, they crossed to the north side and took up a dispersed battle formation. The 3rd Company did the same on the south side. It was obvious that the days of training had paid off, as each formation displayed discipline and tactical acumen. He was pleased by what he was seeing. His driver pulled out behind the last BMP of the 57th Mech and followed the formation. "Sir," his radio operator said to get his attention, "Colonel Al-Wazan reports he is pushing out his reconnaissance element to scout Highway 80 to Mutla Ridge." "Acknowledge his report and have him keep us informed," Colonel Al-Soror replied. As the brigade moved forward, Colonel Al-Soror could see helicopters over the city to the east. Some were Iraqi Hind gunships, and some were troop lift ships. It appeared they were concentrating on the center of the city, probably the Royal Palace and some of the downtown government buildings. It took 30 minutes for the 7th Tank Battalion to report that they had reached their battle position, which was about 1 kilometer off to the southwest side of Highway 80 and the 6th Circular Road. Shortly afterwards, the 3rd Company also reported having attained their position. "Colonel Al-Wazan reports that the lead element of a tank column is moving on the 6th Circular Road towards his position. He is requesting permission to engage. His reconnaissance elements have also withdrawn so they don't fall behind enemy lines," the radio operator informed Colonel Al-Soror. "Tell him to engage when he is ready." "From what range is he going to engage?" Al-Soror asked. "He said he'll look to engage them between 1,000 and 1,500 meters. "Good," Al-Soror answered, knowing that the main guns on both tanks were equally matched. The chieftain would have the advantage of being hull defilade, and therefore difficult to spot on the open roads compared to the T-72. Now if we can just keep the attack helicopters off us. His thoughts were broken by explosions and black smoke in the distance on both sides of the interchange bridges. The 3rd Company, 8th Battalion, had not been idle, but had coordinated with Colonel Al-Wazan on how best to attack the Iraqis. Colonel Al-Wazan allowed the first couple of Iraqi tanks to pass his position and move in front of Captain Al-Abdul Karim's position. When Al-Wazan was ready, he gave the command to fire, and Captain Al-Abdul Karim directed his fire on this first few tanks. The incoming rounds tore apart the first tanks, leaving behind only burning wrecks. Those tanks now blocked the road. The column stopped and rotated their turrets in the direction of the fire, seeking targets, which they quickly found from the clouds of dust caused by the concussion from the muzzle blast. With the initial element of surprise gone, Colonel Al-Wazan found it prudent to withdraw before he started to lose tanks himself. Seeing the size of the enemy force heading towards them, he realized his mission needed to change. Instead of trying to repulse the Iraqi attack, they were going to have to settle for stinging the enemy as they gave ground for time. He gave the order after discussing it with Colonel Al-Surur. Fortunately, Colonel Al-Surur had the artillery engage the Iraqi formation to cover the withdrawal of the 7th and 3rd Companies from the 8th Battalion as they withdrew to new positions further southwest along the Salmi Road. Once they were in their new positions, Colonel Al-Surur had Colonel Al-Wazan and Captain Al-Abdul Karim join him. "Nice job this morning. We at least bloodied their nose," Colonel Al-Wazan said. "Yes, we did. But we have another problem now. It seems that a second front is approaching from the west on the Salmi Road, coming up behind us. The 51st Artillery spotted them and reported that one brigade is out front, with one battalion forward and a separation of a couple of kilometers between the 1st Battalion and the 2nd. Colonel Al-Wazan, what do you think?" "Sir, I think we can sting them again. I propose we ambush this 1st Battalion here. Then, before any of their other units can close the distance and get us bogged down in a shooting fight, I swing my forces south, and we make a run to join the 15th Mechanized Brigade down south," Colonel Al-Wazan offered. "Sir, what about helping the 80th Brigade in Jahra?" Captain Al-Abdul Karim asked. "With there being a concrete barrier dividing the road down the middle of 6th Circular Road, I don't see a way to get to them. I am afraid they are on their own at this point. I wish I could do something for them. Maybe they can hold out until we join the 15th Mechanized Brigade and make a counterattack." No one really had any other ideas at the moment. They were clearly feeling a bit defeated, but were determined to make the Iraqis pay for every inch of Kuwait they managed to take. "Okay, if you have no further questions, I suggest we get ready to meet this new threat," Colonel Al-Surur said. The others departed quickly to get back to their units and start implementing the new plan of attack. Captain Kassan had left his vehicle momentarily to join one of his sergeants, who was sitting on a sand dune with a pair of binoculars. They weren't 100% sure just yet what kind of unit was heading in their direction. Colonel Al-Surur was attempting to get clarification on this when the lead element appeared on Salmi Road. They appeared to be flying green flags from their antennas. The sergeant suddenly started waving his arms, trying to get the attention of Captain Kassan and Colonel Al-Surur, who was still in the vehicle on the radio, trying to communicate with someone. "Colonel, a column is approaching from the west, but it appears they are flying Saudi flags on their antennas. Could this be a coalition relief force coming to aid us?" the sergeant said with relief and excitement in his voice. Colonel Al-Surur scrunched his eyebrows at the news. The fog of war was again playing havoc on his mind. Had the 51st Artillery misidentified the column approaching? "Captain Kassan, see what this force is and who their commander is, so I may speak with him," Colonel Al-Surur directed his assistant operations officer. Captain Kassan was suddenly feeling pretty good that a coalition relief force had acted so quickly and was coming to their aid. He walked out onto the road and approached the first vehicle. The tank then stopped when the commander saw him approaching. Suddenly, Captain Kassan got a terrible sick feeling in his gut. He was standing in front of a T-72, flying not a Saudi flag, but the divisional flag of the Al-Medina Armored Division, which also happened to be green. Mustering up all the courage he could, he approached the tank. "Who are you people, and where is your commander? Do you have any idea where you are and where you are going? You people are as screwed up as a goat herder. Get your commander on the radio and have him come up here. I will be right back and will speak with him personally," Captain Kassan said with all the bluster he could muster. Before the bewildered tank commander could reply, he turned on his heel and walked back toward the sand dune he'd come from. Once over the dune and out of sight, he took off at a dead run to tell Colonel al-Surur these weren't Saudis. "Colonel," he panted as he approached the colonel's vehicle, "we have to get out of here." "Captain Kassan, what are you talking about? Who is the relief column and where is their commander? I must speak with him and coordinate our efforts," Colonel al-Surur said with a bit of irritation in his voice. Kassan was sucking in air, as tankers were not exactly known for running distances. Why bother when you drove around in a tank all day? "Sir, that is not a relief column for us. It is a relief column for the Iraqis. It is the lead elements of the Al-Medina division. We need to get out of here," Captain Kassan said, pointing in the direction of the column. "Driver," Colonel al-Surur said, "mount up, we are leaving, now." He grabbed the hand mic for the radio. "All elements, the lead elements of the 2nd Republican Guard Division is approaching on Salmi Road. Execute the plan as discussed. Over." The 7th Tank Battalion had already repositioned to new locations that would allow it to engage elements as they approached the interchange between Salmi Road and the 6th Circular Road. Captain Al-Abdul Karim had also repositioned as an infantry company from the 1st Elements engaged on the 6th Circular Road had dismounted and moved towards his position. That Iraqi infantry company had no anti-tank weapons with the range to reach his tanks, but knew that his machine guns could reach them, so they were reluctant to move too close and engage. Waiting in a hide position at Hull defilade while an enemy force passed in front of your guns required a great deal of patience and discipline. The engagement must be shocking and overwhelming to have its intended effect. If one undisciplined gunner fired before the enemy was in the ambush kill zone, the ambush would not achieve the desired results and could enable the enemy to flank the ambush and destroy the ambusher. Fortunately, the gunners of the 7th and 3rd Company were very disciplined. On the order of Colonel Al-Wazan, the 7th opened fire at 1,000 meters. Their fire was accurate and deadly as several vehicles were hit and exploded. As the enemy turned their guns to engage the attacker to the north, 3rd Company opened fire and several more vehicles exploded. Lieutenant Colonel Al-Wazan was not about to let this element get off easy and called for artillery fire from the 51st Artillery Battalion. The 51st could not fire as the forward observers were repositioning and could not see the action. Radio communication was also failing, which only increased the fog of war, allowing the lead elements of the 2nd Republican Guard Division to escape the kill zone. Slowly, surviving enemy elements began to turn their vehicles back out of the kill zone. Once they exited the area, they attempted to flee the Kuwaiti forces that had caught them by surprise. As they fled south and west, the forward observers of the 51st Artillery engaged them for as long as their fires could be observed and adjusted. Against a T-72 tank, an exploding 155mm round was ineffective, unable to do serious damage unless it scored a direct hit. But the shrapnel from the exploding rounds caused antennas and any other equipment on the outside of the vehicle to be stripped off or destroyed. Most T-72s carried extra fuel in drums on the backs of the vehicles that could be dropped when they moved into combat. Those drums were subject to shrapnel, and some caught fire when a piece of hot shrapnel penetrated the fuel drums. Several tanks continued to drive down the road with flames trailing behind as the fuel in the external fuel tanks burned. As the enemy ran out of sight, Colonel Al-Sorur reported their success to GHQ, which was under siege in downtown Kuwait City. GHQ was in a state of confusion at this point, with the 1st Hammurabi Armored Division moving on the 6th Circular Road, the 2nd Al-Medina Armored Division moving east on Salmi Road, and the 3rd Special Forces Brigade assaulting Dasman Palace, as well as key government buildings downtown. Adding to the confusion was a lack of communications with the 6th Mechanized Brigade, in addition to calls from the 80th Brigade trapped inside its garrison camp and attempting to fight its way out through insurgents dressed as civilians. The Navy under siege at its base was also calling for assistance. GHQ had steady communications with the 15th Mechanized Brigade south of the city, which had not been engaged yet. Colonel Al-Sorur was instructed to move south and join the 15th Mechanized Brigade and prepare for further orders as a combined unit. As the 35th Brigade reformed and began moving south, the sun had passed its apex for the day. Colonel Al-Sorur was sure that the columns of black smoke rising above the city indicated that the sun would set on a Kuwait that was no longer free. Chapter 10. Decision Point. 1st August 1990. Oval Office, White House, Washington, D.C. Excuse me, Mr. President, but Iraqi forces have just crossed the border and are rolling across Kuwait, Mr. Cheney, the Secretary of Defense, said as he briskly walked into the Oval Office. He quickly added, "The situation is still a bit unclear, but it doesn't appear that Kuwait is putting up much of a fight. Most of their forces were on leave, and they did not bother to recall them within the past 24 hours. Only a small element of the 35th Armored Brigade is engaging with—" He checked his notes before continuing, "with 36 Chieftain tanks, 1 rifle company of M113s, an anti-tank company, and an artillery battery." Cheney had been the first to get to the president after lunch, as he was on the schedule for a different discussion that had now fallen to the wayside. "Mr. President, the National Security Advisor is here and wishes to see you," the intercom to the president's secretary announced. "Send Mr. Scowcroft in," the president instructed. As Brent Scowcroft came in, everyone exchanged polite greetings. As if on cue, the president's side door opened, and the steward came in with a pot of coffee and the appropriate number of cups and saucers. "How the hell does he always know the right number to bring in?" wondered the president. "All right, I understand that Saddam has gotten ballsy and is running over Kuwait. Have the Iraqis given a reason for this? And why in the hell didn't we see this coming? What are we paying the intel weenies for anyway, if they couldn't post this before it happened?" The president asked no one in particular. The steward then handed everyone a cup and proceeded to fill it to the brim with the president's favorite brand of coffee. "This is going to be a long day," President Bush thought to himself. Brent Scowcroft took the question, but really wished the Secretary of State, Jim Baker, had been present. "Mr. President, Saddam is claiming 3 things since initiating this attack. First, that Kuwait is stealing Iraqi oil by using slant well drilling techniques on the Rumaila oil field, far exceeding their quota, which is probably true." "Damn little thieves! Don't they have enough of their own oil without stealing from someone else? We ought to let the Iraqis have them," the president commented harshly. Mr. Scowcroft continued, "Second, money provided to Iraq in the war with Iran should be considered gifts between Arab brothers and not debts. The Saudis changed their loans to gifts when they signed a non-aggression pact with Saddam a few months ago. Kuwait and the UAE hold most of the debt and are demanding repayment." "What basis does he have for thinking that?" asked Nicholas Brady, Secretary of the Treasury, who walked into the middle of the conversation. "It's an Arab culture thing. In the Islamic religion, it's forbidden to charge interest on loans to a fellow Muslim, and Saddam has extended that notion to the money he owes," Baker answered. The third point is that the oil policies of the Arab League are costing Iraq about $1 billion a year, which is further hampering his ability to repay his loans and stabilize his economy. He's not happy about what he feels is a deliberate attempt to keep his nation poor. He has repeatedly asked the OPEC members to cut oil production so the price would go up on a per-barrel basis, thus allowing them to repay their debts and improve their economy. OPEC is currently unwilling to do that. I might add, that's largely because we have told them to keep monthly oil production high to keep the price of oil down. This is part of our strategy to strangle the Soviet economy. Mr. Scowcroft quickly added, in addition, Saddam does not recognize the 1899 agreement between the British and the Ottoman Empire. That agreement is what created Kuwait. During the time of the Ottoman Empire, the Basra province included Kuwait as originally being part of Iraq. The two are only separate countries because the British were horrible at redrawing territorial borders and maps. They seem to have a penchant for creating new countries that will invariably be at war with one another for decades or more to come. President Bush let out an audible sigh at the news. He then turned to the Secretary of Defense, Mr. Cheney. What do you think, Dick? What are Saddam's likely intentions? Sir, I think he's going to go all the way. Well beyond just seizing what he believes is a lost province. I mean, why not? The Kuwaitis are rolling over and the Saudis are ineffective. Why not seize all the oil fields of the Middle East and be king? I think he may even go all the way to Oman. Brent Scowcroft interjected. On the 16th, one of our analysts noted from satellite photos a division moving to the border. At the time, the conclusion was that the Iraqis were repositioning to hit the Iranians again. By the 24th, we noticed that he had moved 5 more divisions north of the border, but thought it may have been an exercise to scare the Iranians. They had fought considerably in the area during the Iranian-Iraqi conflict. The president sat sipping his coffee and thinking for a minute. When he got like this, the staff knew to just be quiet. Dick, see if you can get Jim Baker on the phone. He's in Siberia, meeting with the Soviet Foreign Minister, Shevardnadze. After a few minutes, the president's intercom buzzed. Mr. President, the Secretary of State is on the line. Go ahead, Mr. Secretary. Mr. President, I just heard. I brought it up with my Soviet counterparts. They appear to be just as surprised by it as we are. Jim, have you communicated with April Glaspie on this? How long has she been the ambassador over there? Mr. President, I have spoken with her this morning. She's been the ambassador there for 6 months now. She met with Saddam on 25 July, and they discussed the situation between Iraq and Kuwait. He told her that they were meeting with Mubarak and the Emir and going to work this all out. The Emir was supposedly coming to Baghdad for the past 3 days. She told Saddam that, and I am quoting directly from her, "We have no opinion on your Arab-Arab conflicts, such as your dispute with Kuwait. Secretary Baker has directed me to emphasize the instruction, first given to Iraq in the 1960s, that the Kuwait issue is not associated with America." She told him the party line on this matter, Mr. President, but we never expected it to move this far. What are the Saudis saying about all this? The president asked his Secretary of State. Sir, they're shitting bricks right now. I think we need to get some military people over there quick to talk to them and see how they view the situation and what help they may want, Mr. Cheney advised, before Jim Baker could respond. Slow down. I don't want us running in there and getting involved in a regional dispute between Arab neighbors. This could get us entangled in a regional Arab conflict for God only knows how long. The president countered quickly. Mr. Cheney, seemingly not having heard the president, added, Sir, if Saddam doesn't stop in Kuwait, he could roll over the Saudis in no time at all. The Saudis only have 3, maybe 4 brigades scattered all over the country. They've been buying the latest in equipment, M1A1 tanks, F-16 aircraft, and Black Hawk helicopters, but their level of training in the tactics and the use of that equipment is amateur at best. The Saudis have a mentality of saving face and believe if their higher commander sees them training, then they will think they are not trained, so they never go out and train. This is coming from our contacts with the civilian contractors they've hired. The president turned to the National Security Advisor. What do you think? Scowcroft recommended, Sir, at this point, I believe we should let state handle this for right now, but we should also find out what the Saudis want and be ready to move it quickly if asked for military support. Send over someone from CENTCOM, as that's their AOR. After pausing for a few thoughtful moments, Bush announced, All right, state, you take the lead for now. Get everyone to condemn this action. Let's get it before the UN Security Council for all the good that will do. When did they cross the border? Mr. President, it's been about 2 hours. They crossed at 0200 hours their time. Initial reports say they launched airmobile assaults on Kuwait City as their armor units rolled across the border, Mr. Cheney explained. All right, let's get the staff in here at 1800 hours tonight and look at the situation then. That will give us a better picture of what's going on and how far he's going to take this, the president directed. At 1800 hours in the White House Situation Room, the meeting was called to order when the president walked in. Let's get started. I have a dinner engagement tonight and Barbara gets pissed if I'm late, the president said as he nodded to the briefing officer. Lieutenant Colonel Bob Atwell was well known to the president as he had been the White House briefing officer for the past year. Bob had been a warrant officer helicopter pilot in Vietnam and received a commission in 1971. He had served in aviation units in his younger years, but had been sucked into the Pentagon in the late 1970s, serving in various aviation development projects that had eventually gotten him noticed by the White House Chief of Staff, John Sununu. Sununu had tagged him to be the White House Situation Room briefing officer, a role Bob fit right into. Bob's longtime friend, Lieutenant Dan Corey, referred to Bob as Slicky Boy because of his smooth-talking ways with the brass and the ladies. Bob was a bachelor at heart. Good evening, sir. First slide, please. The first slide was a map of Kuwait, Iraq, and northern Saudi Arabia. Sir, in the past 24 hours, the Iraqi army has moved 2 corps, consisting of 8 Republican Guard divisions, along with several light and motorized divisions, south. On the Eastern Front, 1 corps, the 1st Republican Guard Corps, crossed into Kuwait at just after midnight on 2nd of August, with an airmobile assault seizing the international airport in Kuwait City and the Dasman Palace, which is the residence of the emir. It's our understanding, but not confirmed, that the royal family got out and has fled to Saudi Arabia, with the exception of the emir's younger brother, Fahad al-Sabah, who we believe may have been killed in the initial attack. The 1st Republican Guard Corps reached the outskirts of the city approximately 3 hours ago and is moving through the city and towards the Saudi border. It is expected they will stop at the border. Colonel Atwell stopped to let what he had just said sink in and see if there were questions. As there were none, he continued, In the west and outside of Kuwait, the 2nd Republican Guard Corps, consisting of 1 motorized infantry division and 1 mechanized division, has repositioned in the vicinity of Wadi al-Batn, but outside the neutral zone. A red laser dot appeared on the map, indicating the tri-border area where the Wadi formed the border for the 3. Sir, said the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Colin Powell, I need not remind you that 60 miles south of Hafar al-Batn, at the head of this wadi, is King Khalid Military City, the only Saudi military facility in this portion of the country, aside from border outposts manned by the border police. Those Saudi forces, a mechanized brigade, have been on alert status, but there's no indication of activity above normal daily duties. It doesn't appear that they're terribly worried about the situation. Colin, what other military complexes do they have around the country? Asked the president. Sir, King Faisal Military Cantonment is in the southwest near Yemen. King Abdulaziz Military City is in Tabuk near Jordan, and there are some facilities scattered around Dhahran, such as the King Fayud Military Medical Complex. The president just nodded his head, and Powell indicated to Lieutenant Colonel Atwell to move along with the briefing. "Next slide," Lieutenant Colonel Atwell called. This image displayed arrows indicating the direction of advance for the Iraqi forces. It mimicked what he had just said. "Sir, Kuwaiti resistance was minimal. The Kuwaiti army takes their annual leave at this time of year, and it appears that a recall order was not issued. Therefore, most of their frontline equipment was sitting in their bases and was seized by the Iraqi forces. The Kuwaitis had 3 armored brigades, 1 mechanized brigade, and 1 understrength artillery brigade, for a total force of 16,000 soldiers. The Air Force has 80 aircraft and 40 helicopters. It appears that the Air Force did get some aircraft off the ground before they were destroyed and offered token resistance." "Where is the Kuwaiti army now?" the president asked. "Sir, those that have not been captured are in whatever car or truck they can find and attempting to go south to Saudi Arabia along with the royal family," Colonel Atwell said. "They're offering no organized defense or resistance." Looking at the assembled members present, the president said, "So, gentlemen, what I just heard is that Saddam has pretty much taken Kuwait, and there's nothing the Kuwaitis can do about it. Is that about it?" Jim Baker answered for the group. "That's the picture, Mr. President. At this point, the only thing that can be done for Kuwait is a diplomatic approach, starting with the UN. A proposed resolution has been drafted and will be presented in the morning to the Security Council, Resolution 660, condemning Iraq for this action and calling for their immediate withdrawal. I recommend that we think about some military action." "I second that, Mr. President," the Vice President said. "This cannot be allowed to stand." "If I may, Mr. President," General Powell requested, "who do we give military support to? Kuwait has fallen and has no military to support. We have no authority to send in U.S. forces as nothing has been decided by the Security Council yet, and we're really not in a position to be tied down in a Middle East situation that doesn't have a defined outcome. Especially as the situation in Eastern Europe is very dynamic and fluid at this time, with rebellion against the Soviet Union growing. Mr. President, I recommend we do not commit any military forces at this time." John Sununu sat there taking this all in. He enjoyed meeting with the president at the end of the day to give his thoughts and opinions outside the group in the privacy of the Oval Office over a bourbon on the rocks. "Colin has got to be the biggest anti-force general I have ever met. If we ever get in a fight, it isn't because he pushed us into it," Sununu thought privately. "Jesus, let's at least explore some options, Colin." "Mr. President, before we do anything, I think we should call in the congressional leadership and give them a rundown. If we do decide to introduce a military force, we're going to need congressional approval," Sununu said. "Good point, John," the president said. "Call the Hill and see if we can get the Speaker of the House and the House and Senate leaders over here tomorrow after our meeting, so we can give them a rundown of the events and our options." "Yes, Mr. President," Sununu replied as he scribbled something down on his notepad. The president looked at his watch. "Gentlemen, good brief. As it appears the Iraqis have Kuwait for the night, let's pick this up first thing in the morning when we have more information on what they're up to and what the Saudis are thinking. I would like to get April's opinion on what Saddam is planning. Until tomorrow, good night, gentlemen." The next morning, the president headed down to the Situation Room as the first order of business. "Good morning, gentlemen," he said as he entered. Everyone was already standing, knowing he was an incredibly punctual individual. He was also a polite individual. "Please take your seats and let's get started." Colonel Atwell had already been standing at the podium. The president nodded again in approval and took a sip of his coffee. "Good morning, sir. First slide, please." On the large screen to the right of Colonel Atwell appeared a map of the area with red symbols depicting the Iraqi forces. "Sir, the Iraqi forces are under the command of 2 Republican Guard Corps headquarters. These 2 corps' headquarters are the Allah Akbar Republican Guard Operations Command, or 1st Republican Guard Corps, and the Fath al-Mubayyin Republican Guard Operations Command, or 2nd Republican Guard Corps. The total Iraqi force consists of 30 infantry divisions, 8 armored divisions, 6 mechanized divisions, 1 motorized division, and 1 special forces division. A few whistles could be heard from some of the advisors in the room. Clearly, a lot of soldiers and equipment were involved in this invasion. The attack on Kuwait was conducted by the 1st Republican Guard Corps, with 2 Republican Guard armored divisions, 2 Republican Guard mechanized divisions, 1 Republican Guard infantry division, and 2 Army infantry divisions. Commando raids were conducted by the 8th Special Forces Division, using a heliborne assault on the Royal Palace and Port area, as well as the airport. Colonel Atwell paused for a moment to allow the president to ask a question. When he didn't, Atwell continued. Sir, on this blown-up image of Kuwait, you can see the deployment of Iraqi forces as of 6 hours ago. The 1st Republican Guard Corps, with the 1st Hammurabi Division, the 6th Nebuchadnezzar Division, and the 3rd Tawakkalna Division, made the main attack across Kuwait, preceded by a heliborne assault on the city airport by elements of the 8th Az-Saika Division. The 2nd Al-Medina Division, the 35th Mechanized Division, and the 3rd Infantry Division made a supporting attack on the left flank, along with the 4th Infantry Division on the right flank. The 1st Republican Guard Corps was followed by the 9th Corps, with the 10th, 52nd, and 17th Armored Divisions. As of right now, the 45th, 49th, and 1st Infantry Divisions have moved into the city, airport, refinery, and outskirts to seal off the city and further trap any military or political figures inside the country. Currently, those divisions that made the main attack are refueling and refitting just south of the city. For the moment, they appear to be taking defensive positions. Next slide, please. The next slide showed the western border of Kuwait and Iraq. Again, it was covered in red symbols depicting the Iraqi forces. Sir, he continued, this slide shows the location and disposition of the 2nd Republican Guard Corps, with the 7th Adnan Motorized Division and the 5th Baghdad Mechanized Division. As you can see, they've taken a defensive posture along Wadi al-Batin, which terminates at King Khalid Military City in Saudi Arabia. North of the 2nd Republican Guard Corps, Saddam has positioned the IV Corps with the 16th, 20th, 21st, 30th, 34th, and 36th Infantry Divisions, as well as the 1st Mechanized Division and 6th Armored Division. The 2nd Army Corps is in the Western Desert and has been there for some time, we believe. The 7th Army Corps is in the north, where it normally is, facing Iran and the Kurds, as is the 3rd Army Corps in the area east of Baghdad. It should be noted that the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 9th Army Corps have no Republican Guard forces. These are regular Army units, which are less trained and less equipped than their Republican Guard counterparts. Colonel Atwell saw a question forming on the president's face, so he paused. Questions, sir? Actually, yes, Colonel. What's the difference between the Republican Guard Corps and the Army Corps? The president asked. Before Colonel Atwell could answer, a back-row-seated general seeking FaceTime stood up. Sir, if I may answer that, General Andrews, sir. Andrews was a black officer that had commanded an assault helicopter company in Vietnam as his only combat experience. He was not noted for his exceptional ability, but many felt he had risen out of the military's desires for political correctness and equality. The SecDef's eyes looked like they were boring holes into Andrews. He was here to answer questions when asked, not jump in. Before anyone could stop him, he blurted out, Sir, we believe the Republican Guard Corps are better trained and equipped than the Army Corps for a very specific reason. You see, these units report directly to Saddam and not to the Army Chief of Staff. We believe this was done on purpose to make sure the Army didn't one day decide to launch a coup against him. If that did occur, then the Republican Guard units would be more than capable of putting it down. This competing military branch does cause some friction between the commands, General Andrews said. Why can't these people use the first-person singular and stake their reputations instead of the collective we? The president thought privately. It always irked him when people wouldn't put their name to their own opinions or observations. Turning back to Colonel Atwell, the president directed, "Please proceed, Colonel." Andrews glanced over at the SecDef and melted into his chair from the look he received. "Yes, sir. Next slide, please." Pausing just long enough for the president to read the slide, he explained, "Sir, this slide shows you the general organization of each of their divisions. They follow the Soviet system of task organization and tactics. These are the same systems and organizations that our ground forces train against at the National Training Center at Fort Irwin in California and the Joint Readiness Training Center at Fort Chaffee in Arkansas. Of particular note is the Heavy and Mobile Air Defense Array covering their ground forces. In addition to the SA-7 shoulder-fired anti-aircraft missile, they have good mobile coverage with ZSU-23-4s and SA-6, SA-9, and SA-8 anti-air missiles." Colonel Atwell paused for just a moment before adding, "Sir, there's something else of note that should be brought up. There are several CIA reports and satellite images to verify this, but it appears that starting in January, the Soviets began providing the Iraqi army with a wide variety of new equipment. For example, the Republican Guard units were largely the ones equipped with modern frontline equipment. The regular Army tank units were operating Chinese knockoff versions of the T-62 and T-55 tanks. The Soviets appeared to have swapped out large numbers of these tanks with newer T-72s. They also made sure that all of the Republican Guard units were using the newest Soviet tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, and armored personnel carriers. More worrisome, however, is the number of anti-aircraft track and wheeled vehicles they provided them with. These units will be able to stay on the move with the armored forces, providing them with exceptional air defense abilities." Atwell saw some questions forming on many of the people's faces, and quickly held a hand up to forestall them. "Sorry, if you'll allow me to finish explaining, I think this may answer some of your questions. Once my portion of the brief is complete, we'll have plenty of time to take your questions." He reached down and grabbed several large folders and held them up, adding, "I also brought all the source documents with me so you can read the intelligence for yourself." The president smiled and then laughed. "Very good, Colonel. I like it when my briefer knows to anticipate what kind of questions we're likely to have, and has that information ready to go. Please, continue. This is very enlightening." Atwell smiled at the compliment, and then proceeded to give them the rest of the information. "Sir, according to 3 separate CIA sources in Iraq, the Soviets appeared to have struck up some sort of lend-lease or modernization program with the Iraqis. They're doing a one-for-one swap of all their older equipment for new Soviet equipment. More troublesome, though, are some of the air defense systems they've helped the Iraqis upgrade over the last 8 months. The Iraqis currently have S-200 systems. They're a reasonably decent air defense system, but they left certain gaps in their air defense that became very apparent during the Iraq-Iran war. To solve this gap and beef up their air defense, the Soviets appear to have lent them 2 brigades worth of S-300 systems. Those have the NATO code name SA-10 Grumble. This represents a remarkably potent air defense system in the Middle East. As of yesterday's satellite overflight of Kuwait, we've seen them move 1 battalion of SA-10s to the Ali al-Salem Air Base, but our satellite pass also showed upwards of 3 more battalions moving into Kuwait. This indicates to us that they're potentially going to cross the border into Saudi, or at the very least, make Kuwait a very well-defended place from the air. The SA-10s have the ability to engage enemy aircraft as far away as 100 kilometers, with a ceiling altitude as high as 20 kilometers, meaning they can engage not just low-flying aircraft, but also high-altitude bombers, and even some of our U-2s. When you couple this system with their SA-2 and SA-3 batteries, they're turning Kuwait into quite the fortress. Next slide, please. The next slide showed multiple overlapping circles of different colors, indicating the coverage area and density of air defense weapon systems. He's pretty well covered his entire ground forces with dense ADA coverage, the president thought. Before the colonel could say anything further, the president asked, "What about aircraft? How is their air force faring in that department? Did the Soviets beef that up as well?" Colonel Atwell nodded at the question, and then reached for one of the folders he had with him. He took a moment to find the exact one that had the information the president asked for. "Sir, we're a little less confident in this area than we are in the Army and ADA. The agency's sources are better placed in those groups. What little we know right now is that the Iraqis have a decent air force that has years of combat experience fighting Iran. There are rumors the Soviets did lend them additional fighters and interceptors, which would be consistent with what they've been providing the ground forces, but we don't have anything concrete to report. Sir, that concludes my portion of the briefing on the military situation in Kuwait," Lieutenant Colonel Atwell said, then waited just a moment for questions. With no immediate questions, Atwell made his way to a row of chairs along the back wall of the room, where he'd wait silently in case someone had any additional questions they wanted him to address. The president then took charge. "Thank you, Colonel. That was a highly informative brief. So, gentlemen, what's your assessment? It appears Saddam has moved a sizable force into Kuwait to take on just 2 or 3 brigades. It also appears the Soviets aren't done trying to make life hard on the West with this apparent lend-lease program with the Iraqis. I'd like the agency and the DIA to spend a bit more time looking into this as well. We have been caught flat-footed on this operation. We had indications back on the 16th and should have been more proactive in assessing the situation." General Colin Powell was the first to speak up. "Sir, Saddam has moved a sizable force into Kuwait, but considering that this is his first use of military force since the Iran War, he's probably a bit gun-shy about getting into a fight he cannot win. He needs a win right now within the Arab world. Also, an overwhelming use of combat power precludes getting into a slugfest. From all reports, he appears to be acting with restraint in the treatment of the civilian populace." Brent Scowcroft appeared to challenge that assessment, asking, "Really, how do you account for the corps on the west side of Kuwait heading into Wadi al-Batten?" "Sir, I think that's a smart move on his part. He may be thinking that the Saudis will come to the aid of Kuwait. If they did, where would they come from? They'd come from King Khalid Military City, as it's the only thing in the northeastern part of the country. The Second Saudi National Guard is certainly not going to go to the rescue of Kuwait. They're scattered across the country border in little outposts." Looking at his watch, the president stood, stretched his back, and addressed them. "This was a good update. I think we've gone over a lot of information and given ourselves a lot to think about. Later this morning, the UN Security Council is going to meet." The president looked to his sec-state, who simply stared back, "and we'll wait to see what they intend to do. I feel confident that they will vote for the Iraqis to withdraw back to Iraq, which Saddam will begrudgingly do. He can't be stupid enough to think the world is going to allow him to keep Kuwait. Now, if you'll excuse me, gentlemen, I have another meeting with the Education Secretary, so I have to go. Keep up the good work, and we'll talk again once we know what the UN decides and how the Iraqis respond." Chapter 11. Iraqi Naval Success. 3rd of August, 1990. Dasman Palace, Kuwait City, Kuwait. Rear Admiral Ghaib Hassan had requested an audience with Saddam earlier in the day. He had been the last commander informed of this operation and had only been notified 36 hours before it kicked off. He had not been involved in any of the earlier planning sessions. Once he had been informed of what was expected from the Navy, he had been unsure he could pull it off. As he waited, he reviewed his notes on what his orders had been as he wanted to be sure he covered each point with Saddam. The orders were to liberate Failaka Island, assume command of Kuwait's naval bases, prevent any ships from leaving or entering Kuwait's ports, not interfere with Iranian shipping or American Navy ships moving out of the Arabian Gulf, and relocate our surface-to-surface radar to more favorable terrain. We have accomplished each of those acts, he thought proudly to himself. The meeting was not being held in Baghdad, but in the Emir's palace in downtown Kuwait City, which had only been captured that day. Some gunshots could still be heard in the distance. The door to the office Saddam had taken possession of opened, and Saddam himself stepped out. When he saw the admiral, he motioned for him to enter and have a seat in an overstuffed chair. Saddam took the adjacent chair, and a servant poured them tea. Admiral Ghaib was not surprised to see Sultan Hashim Ahmed Al-Tai, the defense minister, sitting there as well. Once the tea was poured, Saddam waved the servant away and looked to the admiral. His face showed no emotion. "Tell me, Admiral, how successful was the Navy?" he asked. "Sir, you asked me to accomplish much with little notice. I would like to address each point with you individually if I may, and you can judge how the Navy did," said the Admiral. "Please continue," Saddam said, still with a poker face. "You told me to secure Failaka Island. We placed a battalion of naval infantry ashore after engaging the island for 6 hours with fire from our Osa-class patrol boats. We secured the entire island in under 8 hours," the Admiral said. Saddam's only reply was a nod, indicating to continue. "Our next mission was to assume responsibility of Kuwait's sole naval base, Mohammed Al-Ahmed Kuwait Naval Base, from the Republican Guard. We did not assume the responsibility of Kuwait's naval bases from the Republican Guard," the Admiral said with a hint of dejection in his voice. Saddam raised his eyebrows at this failure, but the Admiral quickly added, "We seized and secured the naval bases and waited for the Republican Guard to join us," the Admiral countered with a smile. Saddam chuckled at that. "Very good, Admiral. Continue." "We have prevented ships from entering or leaving Kuwaiti ports. We have not interfered with any Iranian-flagged ships and have not seen any American ships in the area. We are currently relocating our surface-to-surface tracking radar to a more suitable position on the Kuwaiti coast. Our Russian advisors are assisting us in this effort as well," the Admiral added. "The Russian advisors have not been involved in any of the fighting, have they?" Saddam inquired, a bit of concern in his voice. "There were 2 Russian advisors on our patrol boats that seized the southern naval base. They were instructing us on the use of the SSN-022A-B Styx surface-to-surface missiles, but no one was hurt. For security reasons, I did not inform them of our planned actions until we were underway," the Admiral further explained. This made Saddam a lot calmer. Saddam then leaned forward as he stared into his eyes. "So tell me, Admiral, how did you come to be so successful? You are the smallest of our forces, and yet you accomplished much. Do tell me." "Gladly, sir," the Admiral stated. He was enjoying favorable FaceTime with Saddam, not something you always got. "I am a student of history. I have spent much time studying both the American and Japanese naval actions in the Battle of Guadalcanal. In that case, neither side had enough warships at the start of the battle, yet both sides found ingenious ways to use what they had. The Japanese, for instance, knew they could not rush unarmed transports past the American warships, so they loaded up their destroyers with troops and munitions and slipped past the Americans. Likewise, the Americans didn't have enough warships to be everywhere at once to stop the Japanese. So they made heavy use of PT boats. They are similar to the missile boats we use today. They carried 4 torpedo tubes. They were incredibly fast, maneuverable, and quiet. The American President John Kennedy even commanded one. Saddam nodded his head, putting his glass of tea down. Admiral Hassan saw he had his full attention. "When you gave me the order to seize my objectives, I looked at the forces I had and the timeline I had to complete my objectives. Then I came up with a plan I felt would exceed your expectations. I broke my fleet down into 2 task forces. Task Force 1 was the main effort with our 2 Osa-class boats and 2 Lupo-class frigates, along with 3 of the Grisha-class corvettes our Russian friends lent us. Like the Japanese during World War II, we used these ships to ferry most of our naval infantry aboard. Saddam smiled widely at the mention of how Hassan had copied the Japanese tactic. When our task force arrived at Al-Qualaya, we captured the naval headquarters in under an hour. When they entered the harbor at first light, they moved rapidly to get our naval infantry to shore so they could rapidly capture the base and the ships tied up at the piers. We apparently caught the base commander by surprise. He initially thought this was some naval exercise that he had not been informed about. When he marched off to the hastily put-together prisoner of war camp, he realized it was not a training exercise. This brought a chuckle from Saddam. On a roll at this point, Hassan continued, "Our second element was Task Force 2. I had a battalion of naval infantry under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Said Toma. They captured the nearby islands with almost no resistance. 2 of our Lupo-class frigates shepherded the 2 landing craft with the Marines on board. Once they delivered their load of Marines, they came back to the frigates and took the remaining Marines ashore. Our speed and ability to get so many Marines ashore to both targets at the same time completely caught the Kuwaiti defenders by surprise." Admiral Hassan sat back and waited for Saddam's decision on how his force had done. "What were your casualties?" Saddam asked, which surprised Hassan, as Saddam had never worried about casualties in the past, just results. "We had 2 sailors killed in taking the naval headquarters." "And what of the Kuwait Navy?" "Sir, we took 271 prisoners and captured 3 large missile boats, 3 light missile boats, 3 supply and provision boats, and 8 small utility vessels. And we seized the Kuwait radio station on Failaka Island," the admiral proclaimed with pride. Saddam sat for a minute, thinking. Finally he said, "You have done well, Admiral. My compliments to your men. But tell me, are the Kuwaiti vessels in good order, and can your people operate them properly?" "Yes, sir. They are in very good order. As a matter of fact, they are practically brand new. The 3 large missile boats are Rosone FPB-57s that were commissioned in 1983. They are equipped with 4 Exocet missiles, 1 76-62 compact gun, 1 double-barrel 40mm gun, and mine-laying capability. Their top speed runs at 36 knots. "And the smaller missile boats?" Saddam asked next. "They are also very new. They are Rosone TNC-45 missile boats. These were commissioned in 1984. They have a top speed of 41 knots and are equipped with 1 76-62 compact gun, 1 40mm double-barrel gun, and 8 surface-to-surface missiles," the admiral explained. "Did you have to destroy any vessels during the capture of the base?" "A few smaller vessels, yes, but we attempted to capture as many as we could," the admiral quickly explained. "How soon could you put to sea again with these new vessels if you had to?" Saddam inquired. "What is he not telling me now?" Hassan wondered. "They are ready to put to sea now. Some of the Kuwaiti crews recognize the need for Arab unity and have pledged allegiance to us. It seems not everyone is in love with the emir or his policies towards his people." Saddam smiled at the news. He then leaned forward as if he was going to tell Hassan a very important secret. "This is good news, Admiral. I'm proud of what you have done. But now I have a new mission for you, a much larger and grander mission. I need you to move down the Arabian Gulf with your flotilla to include the new ships you've captured. You are to support the Marine Brigade of the 8th Special Forces Division. You will coordinate with them to seize the loading platform in Al Jubail and the loading dock in Ras Tanura and bottle up the Saudi naval base at Al Jubail. Can you accomplish that with the Kuwaiti vessels you seized and your current flotilla of ships?" Saddam asked. Hassan wasn't sure if Saddam wanted a real answer or just to be told yes. He went with the safe answer, the one that would keep him alive, at least for a little while longer. Yes, sir, we can do that. Good. Your basic orders have not changed. Do not permit any vessels to enter or depart the Saudi ports. The admiral received this bit of news as if a wet washcloth had slapped his face. He also knew enough not to ask too many questions or question the wisdom of Saddam. Saddam then continued his explanation. You will avoid American naval vessels unless fired upon first. Make sure your captains know they are not to instigate a confrontation with the Yankees. You are, however, to direct any merchant ships you encounter to leave the Arabian Gulf for the time being until a safe travel route and a proper escort can be arranged. Admiral, I want to reiterate this to you again. We do not want to provoke the Americans or the Iranians. We have asked the Americans to withdraw their naval vessels from the Arabian Gulf, and it appears they have, with the exception of their one command ship currently tied up in Bahrain. You need to leave that ship alone for the moment. If you encounter any Saudi naval forces, request their immediate surrender and attempt to board and seize their ship. If they will not comply, then sink them. Any questions? Admiral Hassan had plenty of questions. Right now he was stunned that they were not just going to war with Kuwait, but also apparently going to try and seize Saudi Arabia while they were at it. Not wanting to question their leader, and enjoying the praise he'd received thus far, Hassan asked the only question he knew it was safe to ask. When do you wish this next phase of our operations to start, sir? Saddam smiled as he placed a hand on Hassan's shoulder. As soon as you can. As a matter of fact, tomorrow morning will be fine. Take the evening to get your men and captured ships prepared. Our elite Republican Guard units will cross into Saudi Arabia early tomorrow morning. I suggest once you move quickly to take the Saudi Navy by surprise, like you did the Kuwaitis. That may save more of your men's lives. Oh, one more important piece of information. The Marine Brigade will depart at 2400 hours tonight and will conduct a heliborne assault at the King Fahd Industrial Port Terminal in Al Jubail. You are to isolate it from any naval interference that could intercede and stop the Marines from capturing the site. The same for the terminal docks at Ras Tanura to the south. As to the naval base at Al Jubail, I'll leave that up to you to handle as you see fit, but no ships must leave. Is that understood? Saddam asked, standing to indicate that the meeting was over. Yes, sir, it'll be done, was all Hassan said, as Saddam left the room and headed to his next meeting. Wow, I can't believe this is really happening. We're not just invading Kuwait, we're now invading Saudi Arabia as well. This is surely going to get the Americans involved. I'm going to need to ask my Russian advisors how they think we should handle the American Navy, if it comes down to it. I'm sure they've wargamed that out a lot more than we have. Chapter 12. Security Council Failure. 3rd August 1990. Oval Office. White House, Washington, D.C. Mr. President, Mr. Baker is here to see you, the intercom on the President's desk announced. The President had just started his first meeting of the day at 8 a.m. Send him in, please. The President had been in a discussion with the Secretary of Education and members of the National Teachers Union, who were attempting to impress on the President how they were all for the children and the quality of the children's education. He knew better. This gave him an opportunity to politely excuse them from the office and end the meeting early. You will have to excuse me for cutting our meeting a bit short. We have a situation in the Middle East that I am sure you are all aware of, and Mr. Baker is our point man on this right now, the President said as he stood. Then the door opened for Mr. Baker. Mr. Baker paused long enough for the room to clear before he entered, and closed the door behind him. Pointing to the couch, the President asked, "How was your meeting with the Soviet foreign minister?" It went well. He appeared not to be happy that Saddam invaded Kuwait, but at the same time he didn't appear to be all that surprised either, almost like he knew something like this might have been in the works. Do you think the Soviets will attempt to intervene directly or indirectly? That's a tough question, sir. It's obvious they're facing a mountain of problems at home. If there was a time when they might lash out, this would be it. But as to your question about indirectly, I think they already have. The other day during the briefing, Lieutenant Colonel Atwell brought up some of the military support the Soviets had provided them during the first part of the year. I had some of our own folks look into it. It checked out. It appears the Soviets transferred some pretty large quantities of equipment to the Iraqis in some sort of lend-lease style program. Our analysts at the time didn't flag it right away, because it looked like the Soviets had done this more for economic reasons than to prepare the Iraqis for war. They were essentially shifting the costs and maintenance of divisions' worth of equipment to the Iraqis, thus relieving their own budgets from having to cover them. I will say this. The conflict is achieving one aim both countries have strived for, Mr. Baker explained. Bush lifted an eyebrow at that. Huh, let me guess. The price of oil. Baker smiled coyly. Exactly. The lifeline for both nations. Okay, then, changing subjects. How did it go at the Security Council last night? I assume Saddam received his eviction notice? The president asked. Baker shook his head dismissively. Unfortunately, no, sir, he did not. The resolution failed. What? Let me guess. The Soviets vetoed it? The president asked, taking a seat with a look of disbelief on his face. Sir, it's a bit more complicated than just the Soviets throwing cold water on the idea. It appears the Iraqi ambassador has made a compelling case that Kuwait was always a province of Iraq, and the 1899 agreement that was signed with the breakup of the Ottoman Empire created the separate state of Kuwait. They didn't even bring up their other issues with Kuwait, such as Kuwait stealing oil from the Rumaila oil field or the overproduction by Kuwait, Mr. Baker explained. How did the vote go? The president asked, leaning forward in his chair. Sir, of the 5 permanent members, Britain voted with us, France, China, and Russia against the resolution. Cuba and Romania followed the Russians' lead. The African bloc of Ivory Coast, Zaire, and Ethiopia voted against, as they felt there has been enough fighting in the region and just want this to end quietly, even if that meant the Iraqis take the country. Malaysia has its own oil and sees this as a way for oil prices to increase, which is what Saddam and the Russians want. Colombia and Finland voted with us. Yemen abstained, stating the Arab League should handle the matter and not Western powers. Mr. Baker concluded. Okay, I understand some of the votes going against us. But why the hell did the French not back us? The president asked angrily. He was a bit surprised they would side with the Russians on this matter. Sir, they feel that if Saddam ensures the free flow of oil out of the Gulf, they don't care who holds the cards. They also have some very lucrative contracts with him and would like to still be paid. I need to note, Saddam's ambassador did a good job of making the rounds and giving assurances to the members that oil would not be disrupted. And people bought that bullshit, the president said in disgust. Before Baker could reply, they were interrupted by a voice over the intercom. Mr. President, Mrs. Thatcher is on line 1 and would like to speak with you. She said it's most urgent. Excuse me, Jim. Put her through. The president got up and went to his desk so he could pick up the phone. Margaret, how are you? Yes, Jim Baker has just come in and briefed me. Well, at this point we have to discuss this with the Saudi government as well as the emir in exile in Riyadh, and we haven't done that yet. I suppose I'll speak to the king right after this call. While Margaret was talking, the president motioned to Jim to get a call through to the king of Saudi Arabia. Pronto. Jim nodded and left the room to set the call up. Margaret, our standing in the Middle East is delicate at best, with our position on Israel doing more harm than good to our cause. I would think that Great Britain would be better at pulling willing nations together for a response. After all, It was Great Britain that redrew the boundary in 1922 that has everyone's shorts in a knot. No offense meant by that. Yes, I suppose you would be viewed as attempting to re-establish colonial rule. We both know that's not true. Look, let me talk to the king, and I'll get back to you later today. Would that be acceptable? Good. Yes, I'll tell Barbara you called. Good day. The president placed the phone in its cradle. He then made his way over to the couch to take a seat while he waited for Jim to walk back in. This has turned into quite the mess. Jim Baker walked back into the Oval Office, announcing, "Mr. President, they're putting the call through now. Do you want to call a meeting for later today after the call?" he asked. "I suppose we should. Have my secretary clear the calendar for later this afternoon, and let's bring everyone in and see what we're going to do. I'll talk to the king and see what he wants and what his opinion is of this thing." Man, what the hell is Saddam thinking? Have you talked to Glaspie? Get her on the phone and see what she thinks as well. We'll talk some more later. The intercom suddenly interrupted their conversation again. "Mr. President, Prince Saud Al Faisal is on line 1. As the president reached for the phone, Jim left to set things in motion for the afternoon meeting. Situation Room. It was mid-afternoon when the president entered the White House Situation Room for an emergency meeting with his national security team. The group included Mr. Cheney, Mr. Baker, Mr. Scowcroft, Mr. Sununu, Mr. Watkins, and Mr. William Webster, Director CIA. Those in uniform were General Powell, Admiral Kelso, General Gray, USMC, General Dugan, USAF, and General Vuano, USA. Noticeably absent was the Vice President, Mr. Quayle, who was on the West Coast, attending a conference for the president. This was only the second time General Dugan had attended a meeting in the Situation Room, as he had only recently been appointed to the position of Chief of Staff for the Air Force. "All right, let's get started," the president said, as Lieutenant Colonel Atwell called for the first slide. It showed the Kuwait-Saudi border with their respective forces arrayed. Colonel Atwell cleared his throat as he began the brief. "Sir, as you can see on this slide, in the last 24 hours, the 1st Republican Guard Corps has assumed positions along the southern Kuwait border and appears to be consolidating their positions with defensive preparations. The 2nd Republican Guard Corps, located to the west in Wadi al-Batin, is doing the same. The 9th Corps has moved into the northern part of Kuwait and is along the Mutla Ridge. 2nd Army Corps has remained well to the southwestern part of Iraq, where it's been for a couple of weeks and appears to be conducting a corps-level training exercise. Early communications intercepts of their radio traffic indicate a defensive posture. We have seen no major resupply of ammunition or petroleum products that would indicate preparations for a further attack. Some SA-2 and apparently some new S-300 missile systems the Soviets lent them have been moved to the vicinity of the Kuwait airport. This indicates to our analysts that they're looking to establish a permanent air defense umbrella over Kuwait, not looking to invade Saudi Arabia. Furthermore, the Iraqi Air Force hasn't had any activity to indicate an offensive role, such as the loading of offensive ordnance or a major repositioning of their ground attack aircraft to Ali al-Salem military air base. "Sir, that concludes my update for the last 16 hours, Colonel Atwell said before waiting for questions. Turning to Mr. Webster, the president asked, "Bill, do you have anything to add to this?" "No, Mr. President. We've seen no moves that would indicate a further attack. Saddam hasn't touched his chemical weapon depots, and his long-range Scud missiles are still in the depots and have not been moved. There are some reports of civil unrest in Kuwait City, but nothing of any magnitude at this point. There are, however, semi-trailers at the Central Bank of Kuwait, and we estimate about $1 billion in Kuwaiti currency is being removed." Turning to Sununu, the president said, "Let's get Brady informed of this and see what we can do to devalue the Kuwait dinar. That should put a damper on Saddam's money grab." "I'll talk to him right after this meeting," Sununu said, making a note. What do you think the Iranians are going to do about this situation? The president asked. Everyone waited for the Secretary of State to answer, but Mr. Scowcroft took the question instead. Sir, I think the Iranians will sit on the sidelines and watch. As Kuwait was the bank for Saddam in his war against the Iranians, I don't think they will shed a tear for Kuwait. Kuwait is mostly Sunni Muslim, and as you know, the Iranians are Shiite, so there's no love lost there. The Iranians aren't coming to anyone's aid on this one, Mr. Scowcroft said. The president remained silent and thought for a minute. Finally, he spoke. Gentlemen, I spoke with Mrs. Thatcher and Prince Saud al-Faisal today. Mrs. Thatcher wants to know what we're going to do about this. She feels strongly that a response must be made, even though the UN Security Council voted against Resolution 660. She's talking an economic as well as military response to get Saddam out of Kuwait. Prince Faisal is shitting bricks over the possibility of Iraqi tanks rolling across the Kuwaiti border to gobble up his country next. The Saudi government placed their armed forces on alert today, but haven't moved from their peacetime positions, as they fear it will give Saddam an excuse to attack them. They signed a non-aggression treaty with Saddam, and feel that he would see any movement of their forces as a threat, the president explained. He looked at General Powell. Colin, what does it mean when you put your forces on alert but don't move them? The president asked, hoping for a better understanding of the Saudi response. Sir, they're probably uploading fuel and ammo, but aside from that, nothing, Powell answered, looking at the other members of the Joint Chiefs for assurance. Mr. President, Baker said, getting everyone's attention. I spoke with Ambassador Glaspie before coming in here. She had a meeting with Saddam earlier today. He expressed his desire that we not take any hostile action against them. Saddam stated to her that this is an Arab-Arab dispute that should be solved by the Arab world and not a case for Western intervention. He also said that he'll keep the Persian Gulf open to commercial traffic, but asks that we remove our naval forces from the area so that total neutrality of the region can be maintained and another stark incident can be avoided. We currently have 4 frigates in the Persian Gulf, besides the flagship USS LaSalle at Bahrain. The naval support activity on Bahrain has 800 naval personnel responsible for serving the ships and monitoring and inspecting merchant vessels under contract to haul oil that has been purchased for the fleet. Since the attack on the USS Stark and the incident with the USS Vincennes, we've attempted to maintain a lower presence in the Persian Gulf. Admiral, how do you feel if we pull those vessels out of there, at least until this thing quiets down a bit? The president inquired of the CNO. Sir, those 4 are there to show the flag and keep the Iranians from running wild, laying mines and generally harassing Saudi and Kuwaiti shipping, as well as our own. We have recently reflagged 7 Kuwaiti ships, just so the Iranians would not harass them. If we pulled the frigates out but left the flagship in Bahrain, I suppose we could say that we were rotating the fleet, and that might appease everyone, the admiral said. He notably had a sour look on his face, indicating he did not like that idea one bit. Let's do that then. We can always turn them around and run back up there if we have to, the president directed. General Powell sat there and indicated no support for or objections to the moves. Yes, sir, I'll issue the order later today, the admiral said in a resigned voice. The president then explained. When I spoke with Prince Faisal earlier today, he said the king must seek permission for us infidels to enter the country and defend the 3 holy cities, should it come to that. King Fahd would need to speak with Sheikh Abd al-Aziz ibn Baz and ask his permission for us to enter. The president paused for a second as he shook his head in frustration. Who the hell is running that country? It was a rhetorical question, so no one answered. The president continued recounting his call. The prince and the king both want to know what kind of support we can send to Saudi Arabia and how fast we can send it. I told him I would send over someone to discuss it with them and try to assess things on the ground. Who should we send for something like this? The president looked around the table for a response. Powell leaned forward in his chair as he answered, "Sir, CENTCOM has responsibility for that AO. It should be someone from that command. General Schwarzkopf will either go himself or have someone from Third Army meet with the Prince, as they have the best information on what can be sent and how fast it can be sent." General Dugan spoke up next. "Sir, I would like to get an Air Force officer to attend as well. Whatever action CENTCOM takes, the Air Force is going to be heavily involved." "Who do you have in mind?" Mr. Cheney asked. "I would like to send Lieutenant General Horner. He knows best the capabilities the Tactical Air Command could bring to the table and how fast they could bring it." Looking over at General Vuano, Mr. Cheney asked, "Got any idea who Norman would want to send?" "Sir, he and I have discussed it, and he wants to get General Yosak over there as soon as possible," General Vuano answered. "How soon do you think they could be en route to the kingdom?" Bush asked, as he placed his coffee cup down. "Sir, both Yosak and Horner are waiting at MacDill in Tampa right now to depart. Just say the word. We sort of anticipated that you would be sending someone over," Powell replied with a slight smile. Turning to an aide, the president directed, "Call CENTCOM and tell them to get in the air to Saudi." Then he turned to Baker. "Jim, have someone call the Prince and give him an ETA in Riyadh. Does anyone have anything else we need to discuss? Colin, what about putting the 18th Airborne Corps on alert for this?" "Sir, it's probably premature to do that. Right now, a lot of people are on summer leave. The 101st has a battalion training in Panama and one battalion tasked up at West Point, training cadets. The 24th has a brigade out at Fort Irwin going through battalion rotations. If we put them on alert, people are going to be scrambling to get back to home stations, and it may be for nothing. I would recommend we wait and see what Yosak and Horner say," Powell indicated. General Vuano, the Army Chief of Staff, made a note to call General Gary Luck, 18th Airborne Corps Commander, right after this meeting. Sununu looked over at Powell and shook his head. He was still a little bewildered by his apparent reticence to mobilize the military to get ready to deal with this threat after all that had transpired this past week. President Bush nodded in agreement. He stood, which caused everyone else to stand. "All right then. If no one has anything else to add, I'm going to call Mrs. Thatcher and discuss a few things with her. Y'all have a good night and we'll talk tomorrow."
Thank you for watching our video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you'll never miss another video.
In the meantime, we have plenty of reading material to keep you busy. You can find it all on our website, frontlinepublishinginc.com.